Muy bien.
Good afternoon. So we are back. We have our last session for today. It's going to be first Carlos Davila and then Sergio Vanderlei. I hope I say it well. So Carlos Davila is a professor emérito at the Universidad de los Andes and is the director of the History and Entrepreneurship Group, and he is going to start.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yes, I try to make the best use of my 15 minutes. And this is the topic, Management History in Colombia, an agenda in the making. Eso es la cosa. Y relationship de esa agenda to Colombian and Latin American business biography. Okay, the content is very long, 3 points, 3 sections, which amounts to 21 slides. But I am aware of the number 1 section, History of Management. We are going to call it MH, and Business History in Latin America, an equal development of 2 related fields. Con una aclaración que M de Management History es la parte de un todo, que es la Business History, es un subconjunto de la cosa. Pero ahí voy muy rápido por razones de que los que estamos aquí en esta mesa todos han escrito trabajos, etcétera, etcétera. Luego voy a mirar Management History en Colombia, an agenda in the making. Ese es el foco de mi presentación. Presentar una agenda de unos 10 temáticas súper concretas. Y finalmente, pero de golpe no es tan importante, Management History en este grupo, ¿no? Y un ejemplo de no two, sino one ongoing research project. Pero lo más importante es el número 2, para que lo discutamos y abramos los ojos. Aquí entonces yo paso el number 1 is that, but I provide some details of how business histories have been developed in the last 40 years in Latin America and in Spain, and explain why. And then I make very clear that Colombia is part of Latin America, and this group is a very small part of that region of the world. And I guess we can saltar. We can skip the 7 first thing, o pasarla muy rápidamente. Los orígenes de esa cosa, la literatura de cada temática, que creo que la conocemos, pero hay que para un artículo más largo después. Seguimos más adelantico en España, Spain, y parte de esto, Alternative Business History. Ok, ¿qué número vamos a hacer? ¿El qué?
9.
No sé, un poquito para atrás. El 9, sí. Entonces, yo salto directamente aquí. En la sección 1, ya dijimos que era, es Background Information. La sección 2 es la Management History en Colombia. No la Business History, la Management History en Colombia. An agenda in the making. Y I repeat the same thing in the next slide, which says basically that business history has been relatively related, has evolved, and management history not. It's very clear. In general, I would say, beyond Colombia and all that, there is a call from different sources to have a renewal of perspectives. I call for new approaches and topics. And there is a lot of work here in Colombia. The very important point for the Colombians is that we are not starting from a 0 point. There is a scattered varied literature that needs to be studied. If people who find interest in the field and want to skip that that doesn't have any feature. You have to read that in order to read the different things that exist, not only the academic works, but in the management history that is so underdeveloped in Colombia, the things that exist. That literature doesn't come from a very specific field, but it comes from different, a variety of fields and disciplines. Business history, management, sociology, psychology, and all that. And with that in mind, I like to say the following. See, you have to read all these things. For example, if you read all that Rolf had produced, is very impressive. But thanks to that, you can realize that management history has a comparative perspective, that there's a lot of work in the States, but by people like him, comparing the diffusion of the American standards and American model to other parts of the world, in Europe, Norway, etc. I would say, just from all that literature, I took some terms. You can see the imitation, or in other papers, people talk about tension, others mention the word hybridization, other people talk about post-colonial and colonialism in management education, etc., etc. You can read that, especially maybe the one which may be new for you is the West Point of capitalism. No, maybe our school can capture that slogan to say that they want to be the West Point of capitalism in Colombia, which is funny. But Harvard Business School was called, for very critical people, the West Point of capitalism in the US, etc. And the last one, the alternative business history, we have referred to in several of the papers of today, but is the one which are trying to develop and to diffuse and all that with Rolf Amdam, with Professor Austin from Cambridge, Professor Jones from Harvard, and myself. The alternative business history, which fortunately our school agreed after a long discussion to publish it in Spanish too. So the original is from 2017, and the Spanish translation is from 2020. As I usually told my students, if you cannot read all the whole stuff, read at least the introductory note to the translation, which is fascinating. Not because I was one of the co-authors, but the most strong points were made by two British scholars, Austin and Jones. Pero es muy interesante, leas eso, son 3 o 4 páginas y unas cosas que yo que no la leyeron aquí, o si no me han dejado. This is a very complex and long-term endeavor. This is the list of topics I am offering. Is for university departments, management school, research group. I would say, please, one day, if you want to do something in the next 10 years, something like that, please take only 1 or 2 of the list. If you really understand what you have to do. And keep aware, not only for the Colombian, but especially for the foreigners, of the shortcomings of the Colombian apparently complement wishful thinking that mechanically whispers. Qué interesante. If something in your courses, in your school, say, qué interesante lista, please delete him or them from the list. Yes, because it implies that they don't want to do anything. I am very, very strong because I know the Colombian model. Here, ese complemento de los perezosos y las perezosas. Methodology. La business history has gone through a lot of debates the last 15 years. I would say you have to read them to see what Americans say and British people say about the field. The alternative business history, which I referred to before, research is based on primary and secondary written sources. Between the primary, archival research, the notarial archives included. Within the secondary written sources, the ones you can see later on, but please pay some attention to the oral history sources. They work very hard on that creating emerging markets project, which is based on oral history. Well done. Bueno, aquí vamos a acabar ya. También, I would say also, besides that, in my experience with this, is that for some topics on the history of management education, the faculty personal archives, the repositories, los papeles de cada uno de ustedes, hombres y mujeres que están en esa facultad, contienen memorias, correspondencia, memos, teaching and research materials, and you have to read them in order to do something. But very important, this statement made by Rory Miller some years ago. He said, Rory Miller, becoming over-concerned about the availability of sources, he says in 1999, is key to build up relationship with business persons. Crear con ellos redes, hablarles, confiar en uno. The British historian Rory went on to say, based in very concrete experience of doing research on Peru, he said, if no one searches for them, for the sources, no one will find them. A very critical and very British teaching. Y ahora que eso no vale, es que aquí en Colombia no, leanse esa vaina y verán. Muy bien, yo creo que the good things that we offer, we Colombia, for in this very specific group, offer are two conceptual inputs that are not very common within historians. First, we believe, and we have spent our life teaching something that is called organization theory. For us, in this group, to some extent in this school, the organization is not a black box. The organizational studies provide the conceptual inputs to approach it. Second, more concretely, based on that, we have developed a schema de análisis de historia de organizaciones, which served us, and many people have used them in thesis and other things, to describe, analyze over a period of time the origins, the policies, the strategy, the structure, the organizational culture, the conflict, el top managerial behavior, la relationship with external and internal stakeholders, and the performance on an organization of one unit, one facultad, one department. The only input that we offer to you is this following. For us, in the last 50 years, we have never thought that the entrepreneur is a black box. I know that many people from the economics school believe that one, but he's wrong. Because there is economic, sociological, historical, psychological theories that provide the conceptual input to study the entrepreneur, the education entrepreneur, in an integrated way and in a very long perspective. And how that is concreted is very specific. We have developed a schema análisis para hacer historia de empresarios y el foco de eso es mirar al empresario en términos de her main traits and characteristics, but not anything. 6 categories only. First, economic, political, social, and cultural context of the entrepreneur. Second, economic behavior and performance, del hombre, mujer. Tercero, socioeconomic origin and profile. Cuarto, lifestyle of the entrepreneur. Quinto, the relationship with politics and the state. Y sexto, the mentality of the entrepreneur regarding the role of the entrepreneurial education, and in this case, in issues not in anything, in issues such as the model of economic development, the idea he has about the role of entrepreneurship on it, the idea he has about the following or not of the rules of the game. In Colombia, the ideas he has about the war and the post-conflict. That is the point, and on this, I offer a list of things, of topics. Son 7 cositas. Primero, please take into account that after all this very interesting paper this morning, this is just a preliminary list, no more than that. It's a list. At least we work it out, improve, and all that. First part of the list, history of management education is one of the areas of our group. History of a school, department, whatever. Second, history of public management education, public management, which is key. Third, managerial facts, fashions, panaceas, bad words, gurus, misioneros in Colombia, en a given time and space, una década, 2 décadas, de una cierta managerial fact. Tercero, history of international accreditation of management business school. We already have 24 years for that. And several schools have trying to get into that. Quinta cosa, history of multilateral organization management diffusion programs. The ILO, AIDE, CEPAL, etc. And this, you can read all that. This is a very interesting experience sponsored by Interman, which is an ILO organization funded by them. We spent 10 years in 17 countries in the world, 7 of them in Latin America, studying organizations which are innovative. The other one is, well, I can stop here to be.
No,
the other one, still?
3 points.
Well, no, the history of private foundations. There is a book by Cepeda Molina, who is promoting management education, but not only the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation too. And the other punto, the history of corporate universities. That was a part, I guess. But aquí we have to face them here in this school, because by the early 25 years ago, everybody say corporate university de la salida al espacio, abajo las universidades. Y finally, very important, please, history of management consultants in the region. Eso es. Lo demás son cositas que estamos haciendo, pero es una lista, como les digo, de mercado, de lo que queda, pero sí lo que no aceptaría yo, para que ustedes lo cojan en sus universidades, en departamentos, cuando lo tomen, es que sí, son, digamos, 7 topics. Lo que yo aspiro es que me digan, oiga, Carlos, los 7 topics, tal, hay que quitarlos, ¿no? Discutámoslo. Pero el primer topic es muy importante. El primer topic se subdivide en N vainas. Y bastante de esas vainas hablamos, we are able to show some examples. And I would like to close this by saying that the best example of this is the group has specialized to some extent in entrepreneurial biography. And Luis Fernando Molina has written just a week ago, he finished his book, which is a very good biography based on our skin and all that. And here, Marta and Juan David were his research assistant during the 2.5 years.
Okay, Carlos, to coach you.
Yes.
Very. Okay, so Gabriela, we are sorry. Yes, there was something happening with the PDF. Also here. So questions, please. Luis.
See, I just trying to link what Carlos was mentioning about the gurus and sort of management celebrities, and thinking about Rolf's comment on intermediaries. How has social media changed? Because of course there's processes of institutionalization and close networks of people who can access management. So I don't know, MBAs and traveling all the way to MIT, Harvard, that's very restricted, right? But at the same time, with social media, there's been a process of democratization in the sense that now you have life coaches and you have this kind of online private courses about management and things like that. So where does that fit in your agenda?
I would say that I haven't listed them. I am not very interested in studying them. Because I can answer your question by looking at kind of serious media, like for example, Portafolio just completed 35 years of existing, and I guess she worked there for 2 or 3 years. If somebody want to analyze something serious in Portafolio, he can do it just by looking at the archives and looking how, for example, the editorial policy of the Portafolio have changed a long time. And at this time, we studied maybe 4 or 5 years. It's a new, different Portafolio in content, orientation, and all that. And el tiempo depends, el periódico El Tiempo. But there is a very important paper here called La República. It's self-called the Journal of the Hombre de Trabajo. Working people was created maybe in the 50s by Mariano Espina Perez, etc. That's excellent. The point is this, more than two. You can study them, but the reality is this. When you took the course, the undergrad course, then when you was a teaching assistant of that course, when Luis Gabriel is teaching the same course, the point is that at this time, we promote the use of videos, internet, and all kinds of resources. And the young people, especially the undergrads, enjoy that very much. And you can, the point is this, I had a very extreme position. The point is that you have a good professor who has very clear the things. You can do the same course. You can offer the next semester one of the sections of the undergrad course, based, for example, in an analysis of the news that appear or not appear in Portafolio in the last 6 months. You can see a lot of things. And more than that, and I go here, last week there was a fantastic picture, una fantástica fotografía, President Petro, first page of El Tiempo, reunido con los cacaos, the heads of the business groups. The next semester, in your section, I'm going to start the course that without reading things. You have to, the kids, 16 to 17 years, analyze the picture and see you. That is the idea.
No, perhaps my comment was more towards the fact that in terms of sociological, there are new people who are sort of diffusing managerial knowledge, which are not affiliated to institutions. And so from what I see is that we're taking a very much institutional sort of history. Also, there's a more informal.
Yeah, and
side.
Sorry,
manage.
just brief comment related with you have asked to me about legitimization. You know, because the social media is critical for that, beyond the academia or
Right.
these institutions. You know, I think it's a very
Yes,
relevant.
yes, I see that two very different ways of looking at the problem. One, the one you mentioned, and you can do many things. Not to combat anybody, but to describe and analyze what they do. This is one thing.
How they
The second sphere
talk about
is more close to what we have been doing here in our group, is exposing the students to differentiate between the content and the sources and the fake news. No, and the content and the sources of the GPT chat or chat GPT. The idea is that these are new realities, but instead of saying that many people maybe in this school say the world has changed a lot, we have to forget about everything. I say, okay, maybe you do it, but we won't do it. We have completed 99 semesters of teaching the undergrad course, and the next semester, we are not against that because we are trying to educate students, not to teach techniques, educate. And educate implies to write and to read carefully and critically.
Any questions from Zoom?
Question, yeah. Professor, Carlos, regarding corporate universities, what have you done, like research and
I haven't
terms
done
or
that.
on what you think about them? Because
No.
many companies are dealing with knowledge, they're losing knowledge,
Yeah.
and they want to know how to
Yeah.
keep it and how to update it, oftenly.
No, I don't know. I know that there was a fad, a managerial fad for a long time. I remember when we went with our former dean, Jorge Hernán Cárdenas, and the former rector, we went to Chicago in 99 or 98. Everybody was mounting the idea that corporate university was the last solution to everything. And corporate university, not sponsored by second-rate firms, but very important consulting firms and accounting firms in Chicago. And I said, very interesting. And I would say, since our viewpoint, which emphasizing two things, the processes, and second, the long term, the historical term, not 100 años, but 30 years. The point is that many of them doesn't exist any longer, at least in Colombia. I'll give you an example. I remember that some say Carlos and Pablo, que iba a ser rector después, we had to do something because El Grupo Carvajal from Cali, he has a corporate university model. And we say, okay, very good. Y el Grupo Empresarial Antioqueño también. Sí, pero fíjate, the point is that it depends on your standpoint on what you are doing. Our standpoint in this group, at least, is that we are in the task, in the labor, very difficult and very quiet, of helping some students in their late 18, 19, then helping some students in the MBA, which means 30 years, and helping some all students in their 40s in the executive education program. And our conviction, I know that many people doesn't agree with us. But the point is that our conviction is that our role here is different from the consultants. We don't have anything to offer to sell to the students. I have some very sad experience, very short ones, of some people. I remember some person who came from abroad, and we very clearly realized that he wanted to teach in the executive education program, because at the end of every session, he saw the opportunity to distribute a business card. or I was insulted. So that I don't say that we are not clinched to the past, and I have to enforce this in front of anybody to have a long-term perspective. It doesn't mean that we are looking at the past, we are looking at the future. And in our group, you have people very old like me, but are looking at the future. But very young people like Luis Gabriel. The difference between him and me is almost 40 years. Both of us are looking at the future, but it's different that to look at the future if you think that this school started in 2015, not 40 years before. So we are so happy to celebrate the 50 years. The group, not the school. And part of that is to say, and related to what I heard this morning, to say that management, before management in this university, existed industrial engineering. And the ideas and the activities related to executive education, but in general, to management at any level, started at the industrial engineering from 1965. If you don't know that, is your problem. And the School of Management started only 7 years after that. And the management Alta Gerencia program, we wrote a paper, an article we wrote. It's clear that it started in 1967. And it's clear also by looking at that this school started only in 1972. And that is the reality. Maybe people don't like it, but it's the problem. You don't get that. And the point is this also. At this university, engineering has been more respected than other schools. And engineering is the most important school these days. And this school is important. That is why you are here. Because many people in the School of Engineering, very old people say, oh, Carlos, you are still for management. I say, obviously. But then when I say that we are writing the history of the school, it's not a big history for nobody to read. It's a number of articles, papers. Molina wrote about some of the faculty members, about Henry Gomez, the founder of IESA in Venezuela, about Manuel Rodriguez, when he became Professor Emerito, about Hector Prada, the founder of industrial engineering. He wrote his biographical thing. The point about Enrique Blas. Without Enrique Blas, this school wouldn't exist. All of them were industrial engineers by accident. No? And now the university picked him as the person who wrote the biography of Mario Lacerda. It was not written by the history department, as many people believe. No, not at all. And it was not written by a doctoral person with doctoral degree. So he doesn't have a doctoral degree.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. We have no time for more questions. Sergio, can you please share your presentation?
Yes, for sure. Thank you very much, Carlos and Andrea, for the invitation to be here today. I've been learning a lot during the whole day, and I hope we can still be learning together. So, the question conducting my presentation, and I would say all my research, and I'm glad to see that many people here in this group share this feeling, is that instead of just making copies or bad copies of what we are not, we should struggle to tell our own critical organizational histories, instead of being catechized to be accepted by the global north. And I'm paraphrasing here Brazilian dramaturgist Oswaldo de Andrade, 1988. We have never been catechized. That was the anthropophagic manifest. So here I am, and the papers which are inspiring my presentation. The first one there is the one I have shared with you. And the second one, there is a lot of CEPAL in that. I'm glad Carlos just mentioned the importance of knowing the story of CEPAL in management education, development management education, mainly in Latin America. And the third one was a paper earlier mentioned by Rolf. So that's where I have been tracking and what is guiding my research in critical organizational history. So the onto-epistemological lens I'm using is the Modernity, Coloniality, Decoloniality Project, so-called by the Spanish Latin American scholars that created it, namely Argentinian philosopher Walter Mignolo, recently passed away Dussel. He was in Mexico at this time. Aníbal Quijano from Peru. So this is my onto-epistemological lenses, which allow us to speak from the margins, but in a double consciousness process, which means we have, of course, to drink from knowledge from the center or the global north and still come back and tell our own histories with our own tools. And of course, respect what has been proposed out. And this is a Colombian anthropologist, Mendieta, on the book Coloniality at Large. He has this very intriguing phrase, which I have been using in some of my articles. I use this quote, but this is the idea that we should also be word with space, because time has been somehow colonized by the Western knowledge, like Dussel says, is the start and the ending point of history of the whole humanity. And we should be aware of the becoming space of time. So these are my lenses. And then the idea is to embrace the historic turn proposed in management and organizational knowledge, proposed by Western scholars, Western critical scholars, let's say so, but still have to put our own pepper into it. So again, the idea that Euro-American modernity colonized time and overshadowed space, and of course, many different histories from different places along the way, because these places were just ranked as abstractions. So after the Second World War, we were third world, then we were underdeveloped, and then now we talk about emergent countries, always in the past related to Euro-American modernity. And then the decoloniality project will talk about delocalizing thoughts. So instead of universal knowledge that speaks from everywhere and about every time, Castro Gomez has coined this very interesting concept of hubris, of 0 point, which means to decolonize lonely thinking. And I like this quote from Mignolo: I am where I think. I am where I do and dwell. I think that's what all of us have been doing here, talking along the day, talking about our place, our way. Because otherwise we see the denial of co-evilness. So different spaces cohabiting at the same time. This is a turning point in the history of Latin America when Nixon was attacked in Caracas in 1958. That's why I make the question earlier about the Alliance for Progress. And of course, after that, the Cuban Revolution in 1959, that has certainly made a shift in the history of management education in Latin America. But of course, we should not be overshadowed by imported agendas of Americanization and Cold War. There was a lot going on here before that. And of course, if the Cold War by Western knowledge is starting in the late 40s, we may say that in our shores, in our Latin American shores, it may have arrived much later in the late 50s, early 60s. So again, resynchronizing the history of Latin America. And Carlos just mentioned the theorizations and methodologies the group has been developing for 50 years, because what we see in the historic turn proposed by critical Western knowledge is that there are some epistemologies and methodologies we should agree, either mainstream or critical. So we should really struggle to inscribe our Amerindian origins in that game, not just pick up the part of the game they are suggesting to us. Because if we look from the decolonial perspective, what we see is also presentism and universalism in Anglo-Saxon knowledge. And then what Mignolo says is that there is this international division of knowledge production. The South only produces culture and folklore at most, and of course, the North produces science. And if we take, for example, the celebration of the historic turn, the main special issues in management and organizational history, celebrating the 10 years of the historic turn and academic management review, what we see in the papers in those two special issues celebrating history of management is that no themes have been included from other spaces, no authors. There are no authors from the papers there, from Latin America and other regions. There are no reference to authors from those regions, no themes. At least we have not been objects, as usual, of any of these papers there. So, what is the proposal then for decolonial Latin America agenda in management organizational history, critical organizational history as a specific subfield? What we have been discussing during the whole day here. So engage with local authors, theories, concepts, objects, and themes by making use of our own lenses. I was very happy to see the history of the Cuauhtemoc Brewery, a family business more than 100 years old. And Rolf did mention earlier the importance of state-led companies in our region, and then to the other side, small and medium-sized business and their extraordinary management, which is a concept coined by a Brazilian author, Carriere, in organizational studies. So these
5
are really
minutes, Sergio.
okay. Thank you. These are really the extraordinary managers we see in this business that struggle for day to day. On themes, we should look at the influence of slavery in our business structures still operating today, like debt peonage, which in Brazil this year we have seen many cases. I don't know if the news reached your newspapers on the wine production industry in southern Brazil. That peonage was really put out on the news from their racism. And in many of our countries, business support to dictatorships. What else we should be embracing to create our agenda? So concepts. While you were presenting today, I was asking myself whether developmentalism in some of the countries has been behind some of these efforts by business people, by Jesuits, of putting together business education programs, and national developmentalism in particular in some countries, or populism, Vargas in Brazil, Perón in Argentina, and Cárdenas in Mexico, for instance, which also leads to laborism, trabajismo, for instance, anthropophagy, a concept just mentioned, sociological reduction by Brazilian sociologist Guerreiro Ramos, Amerindian perspectivism, and as we are talking in Colombia, Fals Borda with Sentir Pensar. I'm just finished editing with friends a special issue on Paulo Freire, contributions to critical management education, and one of the papers that is coming out, is ready to come out, is using Sentir Pensar from Fals Borba to create a methodology for critical management education. And that leads us, of course, to go to local authors and their contributions as part of our local histories. And of course, what I have been doing in my work is drawing from Brazilian tradition and critical social thinking. Just mentioned Paulo Freire. I have a paper published by Universidad Cuaderno de Administración de Javeriana with Guerreiro Ramos and Celso Furtado, the paper on account of management. So we used Teotonio dos Santos and dependency theory as the main tenets of this paper. So what I believe is the contributions of this decolonized agenda in critical organization of histories to insert space together with time when discussing organizational history, revisiting these important concepts, and maybe these concepts would help us link some of the organizational histories we have been discussing. Developmentalism instead of Americanism, for instance, and again, fracturing the organizational history discourses that is sold as if we all had agreed upon. We have the opportunity with the historic turn. It has really put our agenda top of main management journals. So there is a special issue. I just mentioned kind of management review, a good paper on Carlsberg Brewery in ASQ. Organization Studies put out a special issue. Thank you. So then you see that indeed it put us up in the agenda. But of course, we have to embrace it and turn it in our benefit to tell it from our own local historical perspectives. And the idea of exploring these encounters, so encounters like Rolf just proposed, and the disencounters that we may share among our different local realities. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergio. Questions, please? Okay, so I go ahead. Sergio, in Britain, there is a long discussion, by saying long, is the last 6-7 years about decolonization. Even in economics, in the economic departments of most of the universities, there is a group of Latin Americans, Africans, and Asians organizing forces with this idea of decolonizing economics. How your work on your state of the art discusses with with all these efforts in the economic departments.
So in my particular case, I studied economics as my undergraduate course. Maybe that's why I brought Cepal and Celso Furtado as an economist to the forefront, because the Federal University, which I took my course in Rio, is still ingrained in Cepal thought. And so the developmentalism concept, in fact, I have borrowed from the subfield of economic history in Brazil. And I think it's been a very interesting movement, but of course we have to just be aware that maybe it also tends to embrace what other Latin American scholars have been developing out of the UK. So that's also, let's say, we have to just be aware that we may be somehow co-opted by this movement. But I think it has all the sense, and it's going on in all social sciences. In fact, the colonial scholars do not come from management. So I think it's a very important moment. And we see decolonize the business school, decolonize the syllabus. So yes, very interesting movement going on, but I stay cautious from my side. Some authors that, again, that just 10 years ago were post-colonial, and I went to Academy of Management to give an example, 2011, and Walter Mignolo was the keynote speaker for the Critical Management Studies group, most of them post-colonials, and they rejected the talk by Mignolo at that time. So that's why I ponder with the direction of this decolonial movement from the center. You see what I mean?
Yes. Rolf?
I think this personally, I find this very interesting and inspiring to reflect on. But I will not say I have questions or comments, but maybe reflections. And that is, I thought that is what you mentioned, that the need for inserting space together with time. And I think that's a very good observation. And now we see in a lot of disciplines, you have this more introduction of the importance of places and all these things. But if you go back to the 20 years ago or 25 years ago, about the history of management education in that case, when you can say that focus was moved from the US to Europe. I would say also that kind of literature included space and time, because the space dimension became extremely important, because it clearly showed that the conditions for developing management concept education in Germany was totally different from France, from Spain, due to institutional and political factors. So in that way, I see your project as a prolongation of that, or at least linked to that tradition that we saw in Europe, including Japan and more and more. So, and the second thing is that I read some of your works and your colleagues' work, and the rest was on the India works, and I think, but then if you read these things, and you have also introduced a lot of Brazilian thoughts that had an impact on the Brazilian system, and that's very brilliant to read. And then if you go to other countries and also African countries, you will see that we will see that there are different roles, there are different traditions in different countries. And then I wonder, what are your thoughts about the possibility to theorize and in a way to make some kind of generalization beyond more kind of concept on an overall level, like decolonialization and those things, due to the variety. Is it the variety which is the point, or is it some more to the development that comes to more kind of deeper?
Yeah, thank you, Rolf. So the idea and then the concept from Dussel is transmodernity instead of modernity or Western modernity. So the idea of many different local histories to be brought up. So that's the whole idea of the decoloniality project. So I would say that it's up to each local thinker to dig out what is important for them on theorizing and methodology to retell the local histories. And that's one of the reasons why this group of decolonial scholars, in fact, have left the Asian subaltern studies group, because they were more worried about the post-colonial history of Asian countries, which they felt, of course, was important for them, but they had to tell it from a different perspective. And for instance, on the concept of intersectionality is from Crenshaw, so African origin scholar. So I think these, are important theories that are coming out from different geographies again, that I think have to emerge all at the same time. And again, decoloniality says that it doesn't want to be a new universal to replace the Western universal that is telling its own story as begin and end and covering up all the stories. So it's really the idea to open up for different stories from different places to emerge using local lenses.
Yeah.
Sergio, just a brief comment and a question for you. I agree with you that this is very, it's interesting to bring epistemology to our discussions, and I introduced in my article that's already published about business history and all these debates about, epistemologies from the South. But as a historian, there's a lot of criticism as well. There's a lot of debates, even in Latin America. But I like very much the geopolitical of knowledge. So who sets the agenda? So I think this is a critical question, and also you raise in the alternative business history. So my question for you, so I think it's great to have this opportunity to discuss and exchange ideas, but my question for you in terms of the agenda, because I think that is the question, for many years we have been said, oh, Latin Americans are too descriptive, you are not good enough to publish in that article, why should you speak about Argentina, who matters about Argentina? So even all these questions, we have assumed that it's, so only now, even myself, I start to realize what is behind that. No? So, but my question for you is how we can promote an agenda, because Rolf perhaps proposed some topics, Carlos also proposed some topics. What is your perspective? And I think you mentioned before South-South. So if you have any idea beyond these more theoretical or epistemological discussions.
So the other two papers I pointed out there, the one from management learning and the other one from academic management learning education. So they are an application of these agenda topics from this earlier paper. So if I would just be in the panels earlier, I should draw from those, because there I'm telling the business school histories from Brazil using local lenses. So I think this is an effort that we have to go through. And again, listening to your presentations earlier, I was seeing these encounters and disencounters, and maybe from what I read, there is a Latin American developmentalism concept. There is no European developmentalism. So maybe this is something that will support and make stronger our discussions as a region instead of just a country. But it's always a struggle, Andrea. This year I had the chance to be in different international conferences, and I have confronted some editors, I would say, too many times and too frontally, because basically they disregard Latin America, even in the associate editors composition of big journals, and they say they have a good geography. They said that, and I took note of the regions. I said, "How come? Where is Latin America? What do you define as good geography?" And in one of the meetings of Academy of Management Review paper development workshop, I gave exactly this idea, because if you remember, the first editorial of Academy of Management Review this year was how to theorize from emerging countries. So when I read that, I said, I know what you mean, because I don't need to read anything more, because emerging countries is, of course, already a prejudice concept. So how can you come and tell us how to theorize? So then the idea was, they just say, you can use two models: outside in, outside out, outside in, inside out, outside in. And then the presentation was in front of a map with South America and the arrows pointing inside Latin America. So international theories to describe our own exotic local reality. So then I made the question, again, confronting an editor. I said, may I ask if there would be a third way: outside, inside, in and out? Of course, there was a big laugh in that, because we have a big tradition in critical social thought, and that took place in Brazil. Look at that. That took place in São Paulo, not in my place. And then she replied to me, yes, of course, but then you will spend more than the 30 pages alone in the review, because you have to tell me exactly who these thinkers are, what they did. But then you have to go to the discussion area, which allows for longer papers. So it's not easy. This concept of double consciousness, which is from Dubois, that Mignolo has borrowed that. It's an effort of going there and taking back, and that's what anthropophagy is about, right? To swallow, masticate many things, and to get out with something different and hopefully digestible for both sides of the margins. It's not an easy play, Andrea.
Yes. Thank you, Sergio. So I think we're ready for the closing remarks.
Thank you, Carlos.
No,
No. So I think
okay.
No, I just, please.
Okay, how many?
Until 4, 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, I would say that I don't believe much in general in that all meetings have to end with a conclusion. Number one, I know that there are people who are believing that. I don't. So that I just think that each of us have heard 7 to 8 interesting presentations.
Interesting, you cannot use that word.
No.
Not interesting.
Not interesting.
No, the point is that I don't believe in that. And I have written several things. And people who recently died, like Frank Safford, he was very clear in saying, conclusion, what do you mean by? So I would say that for me, in my very personal case, it pays to have us attended the meeting. in place, I have a lot of things. I guess not only in the very specific practical way I propose to make a list and complete the list, but more than that. Because at this time, one very clear learning for me, especially from role presentation. If I understand for other of the presentation is that list has to be rethought, has to be re-elaborated, because there are many points beyond the list. Okay, so that for me that is a very good idea to point out each of you are enough experience to attend conference and all these events and reach your own conclusion, your own points. So that I would say that of course I have other points, but I will say more in a very practical way. That in my case, and for sure all of you have ideas to write and to express and to make very elaborate things for a possible publication, memoir or whatever. But in my case, I have many things about my own paper, but mostly about the other paper. I have very good notes, so that I will say that the other things and institutional things, thanks very much, first of all, to all the paper presenters and to our keynote speakers, and to all of the 7 to 8 people who have either here in person, Carney West, but also to other 25 people which have been hybrid, virtual, but intelligent people, making very interesting questions. So that thanks a lot. And we are going to be here for the next 50 years. I guess I might know myself, but the group itself. That is a message for the all deans and all the authorities and all the people. Because I would say that to write about the whole history of this, the small history of this group is also very interesting thing. To say in a short way, how to survive amid the very good authorities and very bad authorities.
So I just want to also thank you, everybody, for being here. Particular Rolf, not only for preparing this great speaker, but also coming to Bogota from Norway, which is a long way. Thank you very much. And I think, as you know, in this workshop, we will, bring together different people from different countries, different perspectives, because we have seen people working from international business, from many different theoretical perspectives. I think Sergio will present a completely agenda in theoretical terms, and I think we have discussed a lot of circulation of knowledge, institutions, initiatives, locals and foreign ones. So I think we have a whole list of topics to be explored, and it's the best things we can do, expanding our boundaries and continue doing research. And we have a few minutes, but I would like to open the room for any comments, questions, and discussions. But thank you again, everybody, for being here. There Zoom and here. And Rolf, please.
Well, I'm so happy that I could join this, and I must say that I've been doing research on management and management case for too many years. But it was not until when I visited this place for the first time, I really started to understand these challenges that is related to this question of global space. I mean that the management phenomena and management education are so different in different places of the world. And that has in a way had a strong impact on my research, and I've learned a lot cooperating with both of you on different things. And I also try to learn from what Sergio and other people do more in the organizational, critical organizational thinking. But I also think this is, in a way, to be honest, a little bit difficult, because to take the argument seriously, you need, in a way, to be inside a situation to understand the peculiarities. and how then to overcome the barriers of not being an insider. One way, of course, is to create good teams and cooperate, and I think that's also been done within this critical organizational studies. And I think that, but I should also like to say more that would be possible is in addition to creating teams, but I think at least the creating team across countries, both north and south and south and south and whatever, west and east and so on, is a key thing, both from a more traditional historical perspective, but I guess also from a organizational theory perspective. So I have learned a lot during this hours today.
Thank you. I don't know if any comments there.
I think there is an obvious task, at least for me and for our group, is to start reading all the things we haven't read very clearly. Because even in a small country like Colombia, you ended inevitably reading the thing that people like you do. If you look who were not here, it's very important. Colombia is a country of regions and country of scholars and all that things. And I guess most of the people, the virtual, are located in Bogota. Bogota, maybe 2 or 3 persons from Cartagena, but there is a call for us to read more and to be able to get to other people.
Yeah.
Especially if, let's say, we say, okay, very interesting. I want to do a nice work on the universities that started in the 70s in Medellin. Okay, who are we going to do that? Knowing that I'm gonna say the thing that very interesting professor does. It's insulting. But who is going to do that? How many universities there were founded in Medellin between 70 and 80? Let's say 10 universities. Okay, 10, are you going to write 10 papers?
Mhm.
The point is that many of the schools in Colombia have good or bad stories about themselves. In fact, what some of our students in the local course have to make a book review, and some of them selected good papers, good books for other countries, but some of them pick up Colombian histories about XY university or XY faculty. But I would say that even that, the very poor quality materials of a given university who pay a lot of money for people who write very well, for the public relations purpose, even if you are a good researcher, you have to read that. You say, I only read high quality stories for university, you are wrong.
Gracias, Carlos. No sé si hay any other comment from Gabriela or Martín.
I can
Gabriela
make,
tiene mucho que decir.
yes. No, I could make a comment regarding how, well, my point of view is going into the company, a big company, and talking with a lot of directors, presidents, etc. from this company. And an interesting thing that has been developing like in the last year or so is that they want to learn from their own history and from their own cases. So they are trying to, well, I'm writing for them these small cases regarding different times in their history. And these cases are for their own managers to understand how in particular points in time, they made certain decisions, how they approach them, how they make mistakes or not, because they want to use these cases for what they are actually doing right now, or the challenges that they are facing right now regarding certain decisions that they have to make. So I think in a sense, this illustrates that they are now willing to look at their own history to decide things, and they are not using external consultants for that, which is interesting because this company has always used external consultants for that. So I just wanted to, throw that to you in terms of, since I'm not in academia anymore, and it's, this is a point of view from the company, not from academia or from theory, and which you might find it useful.
Gracias, Gabriela. So I don't know if any other comments. If not, muchas gracias.
Saying something that I have a great respect for modesty in general. And I would say that Gabriela is a very modest person in this sense. In this same building, I have invited Gabriela at least 4 to 5 times at the undergrad course. But she talks not about the book she's writing now, but she has a book, a biography of a leader, Eugenio Garza Sada. And in my mind, Gabriela, out of reading that book and discussing with the students, and your very good presentation every time we invite you, the point is that I see a connection between this biography of a business leader, because he was key in founding the Tecnológica de Monterrey, in founding an education institution. So that I would say that, without asking permission to Gabriela, that if you want to read about how this Eugenio Garza went to MIT, came back to Mexico. He did a lot of things, but among the more other things, he was a key person in founding in 1943, the Tec de Monterrey. It's key. Maybe many people, many professors at the Tecnológica de Monterrey have no idea of that. But I guess it's very interesting. So, Gabriela, we are going to invite you again. But this is a different book. In my mind, one is a biography of an entrepreneur. This one is the history of the biography of a business group, which is different.
Thank you. Gracias, Carlos. Hermoso libro, coincido. Muy buen libro. Bueno, muchas gracias a todos y todas por haber participado. Un gusto, sobre todo a los que presentaron y a los que nos acompañaron pacientemente toda esta jornada por Zoom. Thank you very much. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Que le vaya bien.
Gracias Sergio, gracias Martín, gracias Gabriela, gracias Alejandro, Pilar también que te veo ahí. Gracias. Chao.